Speaking of Davion, though, I think this one's also a no-brainer in terms of questions to ask. But will his shooting improve at all? He's 2 years in. I think he's shooting just 31.7% from three. I think he was closer to 30. I think he was a little like 32% the year before, this past season. I mean, regardless of whether or not Davion Mitchell's defense should have been out there in game 6 and 7 more against the Warriors, it's a fair critique to be like, hey, if this guy really wants to be on the floor, he's got to have that two-way, impact. And that two-way impact, because the defense is always going to be there, that really is super, super contingent on whether or not he's going to be able to be a three-point threat. And I think he got off to a decent start in the series from three, and then it just fell off. And it was kind of typical things that you see at Davion. It goes a couple weeks where it's just like, this guy can't hit anything. I mean, will it improve? 2 years in, and it hasn't really improved. He really only had one good three-point shooting season in college, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I know your kind of thoughts on this. I think you're a little more realistic about Davion's shooting. Do you think it'll improve? And I'm not just saying like, oh yeah, he'll shoot 33% this year, but like 30, 35%, like that kind of stuff that will actually get him on the floor. I mean, Kessler Edwards was so great because he played great defense late in the year, and he was shooting about 34, 35%. It was just good enough. And, you talk about Davion, it's like, well, now you've got, like, think about the main additions this season, Duarte and Vezenkov. It doesn't matter if Vezenkov has trouble on defense or Duarte has trouble staying healthy. When they're out there, they're going to be way better shooters than Davion could ever dream of being. So Davion's got to at least get somewhat better. And in terms of unlocking him to be the guy that, reach the ceiling that maybe people imagine, that shooting's got to be there. And it's just a question of, is it going to come up? And I don't know. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but it's hard to be optimistic that he's just going to come out and shoot 35% this season or something close to that.
It is hard to be optimistic. I've never really liked Davion's shot form. It just kind of looks more like a chucker than a pure shooter. The only reason I'm going to say that I could see it improving is that it looks like last offseason. This offseason, he seems to be putting in the work in his shot. He's been training with Steph's trainer. He's been training with Steph a little. He went to some mini camps with them. He said he's been able to pick Steph's brain on his shot form and what goes into being a good shooter. So, I mean, hopefully that helps. Sometimes, sometimes you're stuck with what you are, and I mean, obviously, who better to ask from advice than Steph, right? But I don't know. I think he at that point would just need a drastic change in his shot form. Is it just too late in his career now? I mean, not like his career is obviously only 2 seasons old, but I mean, he's 24 now, 23, 24, 25. I know he's kind of an older rookie. I mean, just changing your shot like that, it's not that simple. So, well, I'm interested to see really how his shot looks going into the season after training with Steph and his trainer. But I definitely have my doubts still just because of what he's shown the last 2 years and like how bad his shot can look at times. And when you're like a decent shooter, sometimes it's just like, I don't know. It's like, dude, geez, you look awful like shooting the ball.
And it's another thing where it's just like, was it midway through his rookie season? If I'm not mistaken, midway through his rookie season, it seemed like there just was a ton of arc on the ball that wasn't there at the beginning. Is that right? Or did he come in his rookie year with that kind of arc? Or was that kind of an adjustment?
I think it was an adjustment. Like when it started like having like the high ass arc and you're like, where did this come from? Yeah, it was it the end of his rookie year or just going into last season? I can't remember.
I think it was the end of his rookie year, and he actually started. I mean, that was kind of like, I think the arc came in a little bit beforehand, but it kind of looked pretty good. I mean, he was getting things to fall, I think, when he was stepping in to be a starter after Fox was essentially out for the season for the final whatever game, how many games it was. But I don't know. How many modifications can you make to your shot before you're just like, well, now you're throwing too much at it?
Yeah, exactly.
And like, I mean, obviously, when you go to learn stuff from Steph, you're not trying to replicate his ability to create space and have fluid movement and just be so quick to get the ball up in such a consistent fashion. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, that does come into play in some regard. I mean, Davion, I don't imagine him ever. I don't know. Clearly, he's not going to be as fluid of a shooter as Steph, but it's just like, how much is that really going to do? I don't know. I think it's one of those things that really remains to be seen. That's another thing to look out for in the first preseason game is how's that shot look? I mean, does it look any different? Is it essentially the same thing? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like kind of like what you were saying. It's like if Buddy Hield went to go ask Steph for some pointers, it's like okay, that can improve his game. But I mean, like you said, Steph and Davion, they're drastically different shooters. So it's just it's just hard to be like, all right, Steph, like what can I improve on? It's like everything, dude. Like at that point, right? It's like everything. Like yeah, he's probably like keep your elbow a little more tucked and follow through and stuff like that and all this stuff, Davion already knows. And I mean, I'm not saying Steph wasn't helpful. He probably was, but I mean, sometimes it just feels like working with those mechanics and like you said, like how much are you actually changing at this point?
Yeah. And are they beneficial changes or are you now just setting yourself back?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I don't doubt that Davion Mitchell, I wouldn't be surprised if Davion Mitchell struggles to shoot in his first 5 seasons in the NBA. And then like some big men that are like older now, like Al Horford or something like
JaVale
that.
McGee.
Yeah, it's just like
In that
developing
video.
kind of a semi good shot. Just be like, yeah, all right, there it comes. To expect it to come together this season, I think might be a little too optimistic. But I think at the end of the day for him, his defense is elite. He's fantastic. He's a weapon on his own. But in terms of being the guy that he probably thinks he can be, that the Kings imagine as a ceiling for him, it all just, as with a lot of guys, it comes down to shooting.
Mm-hmm.